Okay. So once you get it contained, you are hoping you can eradicate this thing, get rid of it, right? That would be very nice. However, just like it says, eradication can be actually more difficult sometimes than just containing, depending on where everything has happened, right? Because you have to go and you have to find every compromised system. This piece of malware or this email or this, right? Because if it got sent to everybody's inbox, you got to go find out if everybody went after it and clicked on it, right? Because as we say, one click in a phishing email, or every click is a way into your network, right? When we do phishing tests and we send out emails to organizations to see if they'll click, the average is 30% of the people will click on the email link. Many places have filters where attachments don't generally go, or certain type of attachments get stripped. But if there's a link and it's semi-interesting, we usually send two emails. We send a basic email, kind of like, check out this Twitter feed. Someone's going to get fired over this. And they just put over the top of it, it's that organization's Twitter feed as the link, but it's actually a link to our server that'll just give us a check mark that person clicked on it. But you would think people would not click on this. But that simple email was actually the one that had more clicks than the moderately sophisticated one that we tried to get them to click on. So we did the Twitter thing, and then we did a email that said, here's next year's pay scale that they're talking about instituting. So that's pretty interesting, right? It seems rather benign. They're putting out the new pay scale, depending on where you are. Maybe you're up for a promotion next year. You want to check it out, and you click on it. Fewer people clicked on that than they did the Twitter feed. That may be true. So as this says, getting it. And then the other part of it too, we find that people forward emails, right? If it's an interesting enough one, not only will you get that in your inbox, if your buddy, your friend, just thinks that you'll also be interested in it, now you got another copy. And so now they could be flying, I don't want to say flying all over the place, but they could be, have multiple copies coming in. So if you ask the person, hey, did you just, delete all those copies? Or delete the one you got? Yep, sure did. But if you forget about the one that, your friend sent you, you may very well have that available. Yeah.
How do you identify it if it's legitimate? I mean, do you have any tips for that?
Okay.
I mean, other than not clicking on anything ever.
So some of it is as simple as hovering your mouse. Have you ever hovered your mouse over a link? And sometimes it's not what the link says it is. So that's one possible indicator that you don't want to click on that. The other is to reach out to the source and say, hey, Wayne, did you send me an email that said this? And is it a link? Is it legit? So it's kind of like a little bit more legwork, if you will. But the way to really figure out if it's legitimate is, first off, don't click on it, right? And don't forward it to your friends, or you may not even want to forward it to your security team necessarily, but contacting the security team and saying, hey, we received this email. It looks legit, but I'm not sure, because spear phishing is getting better. And if you do care enough to do that, I would check with them and say, okay, did you guys receive this too? Is it legit? And a lot of times, many of those blast emails are organizational ones. So if you ask the right managers to find out, hey, did management send this kind of email to us? That'd be a good way to see about that. And you hope all the rest of your defenses help you, right? If it's trying to go out a particular unusual port, you have a very strong proxy that has whitelisting involved, so it shouldn't go anywhere that doesn't have a legitimate reason for going. Hopefully those pieces are helping you helping with the human nature of many people. It appears, at least currently, that clicking on a link is not a big deal to most people, right? I'm guilty. Sometimes I've clicked on stuff and went, ooh, I wonder if I should have clicked on that. Too late. Fortunately it was legitimate, but I thought about it after the fact. So hopefully the rest of the defenses that are in place will help you deal with that. Excuse me. So methods for eradication, right? There's re-imaging of systems, completely wiping it clean and putting on a new operating system, etc. If it's a particular type of attack that can be patched, like you've maybe heard of Heartbleed or Poodle, and a few others that have some interesting names, those actually have, or Shell Shock for that matter, have particular patches that come from the vendors. So hopefully you don't have to wipe everything off, which would be nice, because then you can keep the person's or that server's data intact for the most part. And all you're doing is stopping that particular attack from ever coming through again. You can disable services, like I was mentioning earlier. Are you using FTP as a file transfer within, right, versus SSH or secure copy, excuse me, and those kind of things. So you can disable those services, and that'll stop it. Now, it talks about eradication. I'm not so sure. It's like eradicate it by removing it, and then keep them out by doing some of these things, right? Disabling those services so they don't get back in using that same particular attack, right? Removing the accounts if it's an illegitimate. A lot of organizations are guilty of this, right? When people leave the company, how many, right? John Doe no longer works at Acme, but can you go in and john.doe@acme.com, and there's still a user there. Sometimes they disable them, but there's a lot of times, right, where they don't actually go back and make sure that that's clear. So that's something, actually removing accounts, not just, or at the very least disabling them, but the fact that it's not there would be just even that much better. And then changing configurations, that deals again with mostly with keeping things from coming back in versus actually, and eradication of course does mean removing it in such a way that it hopefully never comes back again. So, but that's what the configuration changes would indicate. Okay. So when you're doing eradication actions, you do want to talk to the folks who own, if you are not the owner, as most incident response teams won't be the actual owners of what they are responding to. You definitely want to talk to the stakeholders. Certainly when you do those eradication actions of wiping things or changing configurations, certainly. So keeping those communication lines open is paramount to making sure operations stay up and you don't cause any real problems. Despite the fact that second line is true, that management does want containment, eradication, and recovery under very short timelines, it is not a reason to be sloppy. It is not a reason to rush through things. Be thorough, because like we were just talking about, one account, one piece of malware still left behind can cause it to come right back. So there's always pressure. There's always time. Everybody's in a hurry, of course, to do these sorts of things. But being thorough and doing a good job still holds, right? Still holds true. So attorneys might be involved. If you're looking for responsible parties, or there's some reporting that has to happen, especially with things like PII. Has anybody had any data breached? Did a credit card company or anybody else? Did you all receive a call or an email or anything before? Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah. So not a great call, right? Not a great letter or email that you get. In the military, 3 times, for whatever reason, the military had lost some of my data and told me to be careful and to go get my Social Security number and my credit, like do the lockdown thing on my credit. So fortunately, no one, as far as I know, has stolen my identity. Or they're doing a great job of keeping me away from seeing it. So the attorneys, like I was saying, there might be some legal requirements, right? PII, the personally identifiable information, and there's possibly some other company concerns. And then, like I just mentioned, complete eradication is not guaranteed, right? And following the standard methods that you set up, establish the solid procedures and the checklists that you set up, will go a long way towards giving you high levels of assurance when you're talking about eradication. Excuse me. Okay, and then the recovery piece. And everybody wants to get to recovery as soon as possible, right? You want to get full services or the best as possible, considering if you have a major breach or a very widespread attack that affects many systems. You want to get up to as close to fully functional as possible, right? And as part of the recovery, a best practice would be to implement monitoring systems. Again, this is the sort of thing that, first off, if they don't generally have the monitoring and the logging to begin with, get that turned on, get that started. Now, if you already have that, that's what I'm talking about when I say if it's possible to turn the sensors on facing inward towards your the inside of your network, not just outward facing, thinking that everything's on the outside. Because once that outsider gets a legitimate account on the inside, they are now an insider. Not insider threat in the traditional sense of somebody who works there that's disgruntled, but as an account, they are legitimate. So increasing that visibility with monitoring and logging is key to being able to see things. So as part of recovery, if you are a part of an organization that does this, lobby for better monitoring and better sensors within your network. Right? And this is the same, the improve and enhance logging immediately to capture any abnormal activity. See if you can face some of those sensors inward. The things that you weren't logging on before, try to log on them. Right? There is a balance when we talk about allows focus towards eradication without overwhelming amounts of data. Right? It's not just turn on all logs as much as possible. Talk about the kinds of things that you need. This is where that digital forensics team, talking with the incident response team, would be beneficial. What is it that you really need when things go down? What sorts of things are you looking for? Right? And then still, you got to have the gate at the door, or you got to have a lock on the door. You got to have a guard at the gate. Right? That normal logging and that log review. You have to have a baseline, or you should try to have a baseline, if at all possible, in order to know what abnormal is within your network. So that normal logging has to continue. The normal reviews have to continue. Okay. So just some lessons learned from prior events, right? Just reviewing the previous incident. The sit down with the people and doing what the military calls a hot wash, but essentially an after-action meeting, after-action report of things that you might have learned. That goes a long way into improving your processes and improving how things will go the next time around. Right? Review that incident response plan. Ask those questions. Was it sufficient? Right? Sometimes this is hard to answer. What is sufficient enough? Those are difficult questions sometimes to answer, right? What could be improved? Certainly there are things that could go better. So make sure those get documented. And hopefully you're not in a situation where you're going from one incident to another, and so you actually have some time to document these improvements. Otherwise, your very next incident that you go after, you may have the same exact problems or the same exact issues that you just encountered if you're not able to fix them in your incident response plan, unless you have a bunch of red ink on your incident response plan as you adjust it as you go. Sometimes that works out to be the way it is. Look for the gaps within the plan. Those gaps could be in the processes and the procedures, or is it, was your team adequately trained? Right? Did they have the actual right tools? Right? And then, or if the gap was actually in the structure, or what they knew or what they didn't know. Maybe that was a communication issue. So all very important things, all good questions to ask after the recovery portion of it, and try to make your processes better. Okay? Reviewing the eradication results. How effective was what you did? Right? Did you meet your timelines? Right? Would you consider it successful? Did you have a mini outbreak right afterwards? Maybe not so much, right? And then what issues were encountered when you were trying to eradicate? This is where that you make the discussions about, if it's a main operational server, should you talk to the folks about setting up a load balancer and get a backup server, so if anything like this ever happens again, you'll be able to bring something down without stopping operations dead, right? And then remediation actions too are quite important. You should bring up the fact that we discovered these things, these misconfigurations, these things that can be fixed relatively simply, relatively quickly. Those should be brought up, right? The preventative measures in place, and then maybe not initially, but eventually someone should go and test the new configuration. Go test, right? There's times where people think they've set up a firewall rule, and you actually try it from the other side, and it gets through because they mistyped. They put in the wrong port, whatever the case is. Sometimes that stuff happens. We're human. People make mistakes, right? And then other issues discovered, that could be many different things. So time to think about those things and discuss them with the team. If they have that opportunity, it would be very, very beneficial to making the next iteration of an incident response much better.